Imagine a government has a problem with a charity. Maybe it runs schools the government dislikes or reports on things officials would rather bury. The old way to deal with it would be to ban it. But a ban is loud. It invites lawyers, courtrooms, headlines, martyrs. So the modern way is quieter. The government doesn't ban the charity. It simply lets one piece of paper expire. The license that lets the charity receive money from abroad. No money, no charity. And under a new rule being debated in India this week, the hospital that charity built with that foreign money now belongs to the state. No ban, no trial, just a license that quietly lapsed. Here's the specific rule. India, like many countries, requires any nonprofit that accepts foreign donations to hold a special license, the FCRA registration, short for the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. That license has to be renewed. This week, Parliament is debating an amendment that changes what happens when a group loses it or simply fails to renew in time. Under the new bill, a government-appointed designated authority takes control of everything the organization built with foreign money, the land, the buildings, the hospitals, the schools. If the group isn't re-registered within a set window, those assets don't just freeze. They permanently pass to the state. They can be handed to a government department or sold with the proceeds going straight into the national treasury. The government's case is straightforward. Foreign money can be used to influence a country's politics and institutions, so it needs close oversight against misuse. Critics, opposition politicians, rights groups, some religious charities, even a few foreign lawmakers call it draconian and point at the numbers. Since 2010, around 22,000 of these licenses have already been canceled outright. Another 15,000 simply expired, never renewed, never fought over. This bill decides what happens to everything, all those groups. Now, the argument you'll hear is the obvious one. Are these charities good actors or bad ones? And is the government protecting the nation or crushing dissent? That's a real fight, but it isn't ours, and it isn't the interesting one. Because whatever you think of any single NGO, look at the mechanism the government reached for. It didn't reach for a ban, it reached for a money license. And the moment you make an organization's survival depend on renewing a license, you have built something with a very particular shape. Think about what a renewable license actually is. It isn't a rule you either break or obey. It's a switch that has to be actively flipped back on again and again by the very authority that might want you gone. To ban an organization, a government has to do something, pass an order and defend it, maybe in court. To end an organization under a license regime, it has to do nothing. It just lets the clock run out. Silence becomes the weapon. There's no dramatic moment to challenge, no order to appeal, because on paper, nothing happened. A form simply wasn't approved. That alone is powerful. The new rule adds a second piece that makes it sharper. What happens to the assets? A charity spends 20 years turning foreign donations into a hospital, a school, a clinic, real buildings, serving real people. Under the amendment, if the license lapses, those buildings pass to the state, sold or absorbed, the value swept into the treasury. Notice the mismatch. The trigger is administrative, a renewal that didn't come through. The consequence is total. Decades of work gone. In most of life, we expect the size of a penalty to match the size of a wrong. Here, a paperwork lapse and a proven crime lead to the same place, because a license regime never really asks what you did. It only asks whether the switch is on. And here's the part that tells you this isn't really about one country. The switch gets thrown using words that can mean almost anything: foreign influence, national security, and, in India's new rules, proselytization, trying to change people's religion. Elastic words decided by the executive with no judge required to agree. When the standard for pulling the switch is that broad, the switch belongs, in practice, to whoever holds power, which is exactly why the same design keeps appearing all across the political map. The ancestor is American, a 1938 law called FARA, written to unmask Nazi propagandists, which labels those acting for foreign interests. Russia took that idea in 2012 and sharpened it into a tool, tagging hundreds of outlets and individuals as foreign agents. Georgia copied Russia's version in 2024. Hungary has tried its own more than once, and others across Europe are moving the same way. Left governments and right governments, democracies and autocracies, the design travels because it is deniable. Nobody has to say, we are silencing our critics. They say, we are regulating foreign money for transparency, which sounds reasonable and sometimes genuinely is. That deniability is the feature, not a side effect. A ban announces itself. A license regime hides inside the ordinary language of paperwork and security, which is what makes it so easy to adopt and so hard to fight. So if a country genuinely worries about foreign money buying influence, and that worry can be real, what could it build instead? 3 designs already run somewhere in the world, and each meets the concern without handing anyone a silent off switch. Each has a price. The first attacks the root instead of the donor. Groups reach for foreign money because there's often so little at home. So build a home base. Let every taxpayer send 1 or 2% of the income tax they already owe to a charity of their choosing. Hungary started this in 1996, and Slovakia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania followed. Today, in those countries, more than a third of taxpayers steer part of their taxes to civil society. Depend less on foreign donors, and the whole fight loses its heat. The catch is quiet. Once that 1% exists, governments treat it as the whole job and scrap the separate tax breaks people used to get for donating. So charities can end up with less money coming in, not more. And the state still decides who is even allowed into the pool in the first place, which is a softer hand on the very same switch. The second regulates the influence, not the passport of the money. The real fear is foreign hands on policy. So register the act of lobbying itself by anyone, foreign or local, who is trying to move which law and funded by whom out in the open. The European Union, the United States, and Ireland all run versions of this. It aims at the actual harm rather than the nationality of a donation. The price, lobby registers leak, much of the real influencing gets quietly reclassified to slip past them, and they catch lobbyists while missing the charity that simply runs a school. The third takes the switch out of the government's own hand. The deepest flaw was that a ministry holds it. So hand oversight to a regulator built to stand apart from the government of the day, its own budget, its own commissioner, and an independent tribunal to appeal to. England's Charity Commission and Australia's Charities Regulator work like this. They can still register and sanction, but no minister can quietly flip the switch, and a charity can fight a decision in front of a judge. The price bites 2 ways. Right now, an arm's-length regulator tends to be a gentle one. It leans light touch, which means a genuinely bad actor can operate for years before it moves. And over time, the independence itself erodes. A government can starve the regulator of money or pack its board, and the whole thing still rests on courts staying free, which is exactly what these foreign money laws tend to hollow out. Notice what none of these is. None of them says never watch foreign money. Each is a different answer to the same question. How do you watch the money without owning the off switch? So come back to that charity and its quietly expiring license. The headline will be about that country and that government and whether those particular NGOs deserved it. But the durable thing underneath is a piece of institutional design that has quietly gone global, a way to end organizations without ever banning them, by turning their funding into a license, their license into a switch, and their buildings into the states. There may be good reasons to watch foreign money, but watching is not the same as holding the switch, and a penalty triggered by a lapse form is not the same as one earned by a proven wrong. So the next time a government says it is simply regulating foreign funding for transparency, the useful question isn't whether these NGOs are good. It is, what does this rule actually control? And who can pull the switch without ever facing a judge?